All right, so I've got some rinsed out soil here that I'm going to be re-amending with compost ingredients here. I've got some lawn clippings and weed clippings from the mulching bag, and I've got some somewhat rotted leaves here. These were green leaves that I soaked in rainwater, and I used the runoff to water plants. This is the runoff that you get. It's about 350 parts per million right now, like lots of NPK, calcium, magnesium, and all kinds of, and you can see it's kind of foamy too actually, so it's got a little bit of a wetting agent. And here you've got some goldenrod that I picked and it got rained on last night, but this is, basically these are flowers essentially. So it's going to have a little bit of a maybe a different nutrient profile than the green stuff. So the theory here is you take your used soil and rinse it out, which I did in a previous video, until your runoff is coming out at about, for me, I'm doing it at about 1200 ppm on a Hanometer. And the idea here is, when you rinse out your used soil, you're rinsing out the sodium, which is more readily leachable, and you're hopefully improving any nutrient imbalances in terms of NPK, sulfur, calcium, magnesium, etc. I think calcium, magnesium is one of the most resistant to leaching, so which is fine. So here's some rinsed out soil, and it's perfectly good to reuse. It's a little bit low on fertility because it's been leached, but it does still have some compost, and it will still leach. It will still, decay into NPK and different nutrients, but really it's rinsed out pretty good, and it's going to perform a heck of a lot better if we add some amendments and let it cook. So basically putting some green leaves in there, letting them rot, and I'm going to go big. So this is, by volume, I'm looking at probably 6 or 7 gallons of soil right here, and I'm gonna match that like 1-to-1 with 6 or 7 gallons of, by volume, of amendments. So you're going to end up with something that's along these lines. And I do have some dried grass that I got from a nice clean place. All the amendments I'm putting in here are from somewhere that's nice and clean. No Roundup, no herbicide, no Grub-X or petrochemical fertilizers. So just dried grass that I found from a lawn that was a huge lawn that I had access to, and it was never treated with anything. It's just they just mow it. So anyways, you're going to end up with something that's kind of thick with greens here to rot down. And once it does rot down, it's going to be, this is actually just about a week ahead of that one, and you can see it's more soil now instead of being so much leaf material and green material. So it takes about 4 weeks, depending on the temperature, to really rot down into a nice crumbly material. So it takes a little time and temperature, and in the winter time it gets a little colder. If you have a place in the basement, you can probably still do this process, but I mean, if you have a little greenhouse, you want to get started early in the spring, maybe you can have some of this tucked away. As long as you keep it covered and out of the rain, it'll keep its nutrients for the most part. So if you can prepare this in the fall and use it in the next spring, that's no problem. These are just $5 bins I got at Walmart. They're 18 gallons. They come with good lids, and you can stash a few of those for your spring plantings. All right, so I got some of this in here. I like to mix it in little by little and kind of chop it up. You can chop it up with your shovel, but you could also use your mower if you wanted to spread some of it out on the lawn and just kind of go over it with your mower. And if you have a mulching bag, you can it kind of sucks it back up. So that'll help chop it up into little bits. It's kind of nice to chop it up into little bits because it makes the process go faster. And I try to do it with the shovel, without causing too much trauma to the bin. I actually have another shovel that's not as sharp as this, and that way it's easier to chop at it without hurting the bin. So I really don't want to poke holes in it. If you do get your bins rained in and they get water in the bottom, that is essentially kind of a bad thing, because it will tend to go anaerobic. So in reality, you probably it wouldn't be so bad to have holes in your bins, but I use these bins to collect rainwater sometimes and stuff, so didn't really want to put holes in them if I don't have to. As I mentioned in the other video, if you want to get some idea how strong your used soil is, this is all about recycling used soil. So if you have some used soil and you want to know how strong it is, like I said, you can go by the runoff. I like to, sometimes I've had soil that was, not leached enough, that's built up enough salt to measure 5,000 in the runoff, and that's going to be some probably pretty poor performing soil. Leaving some out in the rain for a long time, for like months and months, I found runoff to be in the range of about 800. And when I've leached anywhere from 800 to 1200, and I figure the numbers will kind of drop and then reach sort of like a plateau. And when it reaches that plateau and a number is in a range of 1,000, I feel pretty confident about that. But if you let it sit and soak in some water, it is going to, more nutrients are going to dissolve. More of the salts are going to dissolve into ions. So if you come back the next day and then leach it again, your numbers will jump up initially, but then they'll jump right back down to that 1,000 number or 1,200 number or whatever it wants to settle at. So I'm pretty comfortable at 1,200. If you want to know how strong your soil is, that's one way to do it. Another way is called a slurry test, and you take a one part soil to 1 part rainwater or whatever clean water you have, and mix it together in a slurry. Use this meter, so it's a TDS meter or an EC meter, and get your initial reading. And in this case, my initial reading on this soil is about 350, and then you get like a reading after it soaks for a while. Actually, I think my initial reading on this is more like 300, and after it soaks for a little while, like an hour or so, I get about a 400. So that's what I consider to be relatively low fertility soil. And after you let this stuff cook, and really start to rot down, this is, not a good example of, this one's only about a week and a half in, so it needs another 3 weeks to go. But once it becomes nice and crumbly and rotted down, you can do a slurry test on this. And what I like to see is a number, something along the lines of 700 for your initial and 1,000 for your, 1 hour number. And that gives you the idea that you got some pretty decent fertility in that soil. And now you can use this soil, with a sort of ratio with your rinsed out soil. So you could do 1-to-1 rinsed out to composted, and then you've got and you can kind of dial in the strength as needed. You can go, bigger on the compost side or bigger on the rinsed out side. Or you could probably even go straight in this if you have the right situation. But, if you want to make it stronger, you can also add a second, run of greens, or you can add just more greens. I mean, in some cases you can do a 2-to-1 ratio by volume of greens to browns, depending on the type of greens you're dealing with. So this usually 1-to-1 ratio for me usually results in a cold compost, and just because of the nature of the greens I'm using. So these aren't really going to heat up very much, but I don't really care because I don't mind weed seeds. I actually like weed seeds, and I don't want to harm the bugs. I actually like the bugs, and I'm not too worried about diseases because I'm not amending with animal waste in these bins. If you guys have any questions, please post them up. If you have any suggestions, please post them up. Thank you.